Hello YouTube, SentinalhMC here for episode 26 of my RotaryCraft tutorial series. In this episode we're going to talk about the TNT Cannon, the next weapon down the list. It's another of those weapons that does exactly what it says. The arrow gun was the first, the heat ray was pretty much as well, and the TNT Cannon continues the trend of telling you exactly what it does in the name. So quite simply, the TNT Cannon will fire TNT in whatever direction you tell it to, at whatever speed and angle you tell it to. We'll get into all that. First, let's see how to make it. The TNT Cannon, it has a bit of a complex recipe because it takes a lot of different things, but it's actually pretty simple and not too expensive. It requires a chest, a compressor, 3 base panels, 2 circuit boards, a redstone block, and an HSLA steel ingot. So it's pretty darn cheap. The circuit boards, you know, those aren't that expensive, especially if you've got an ender pearl, you get both of them at once. But yeah, it's not that expensive. But still, you probably wouldn't want this thing to just blow up because, you know, it is some resources here. A peripheral that you can create as well is the Tnt Cannon Targeting Aid, which is crafted like this: 4 steel ingots, an ender pearl, a redstone dust, and a lapis lazuli. The problem is I haven't figured out how to use it. Like, with the Tnt Cannon Targeting Aid, you're supposed to, it says that if your TNT cannon is set to targeting mode, that you can just look at your target with the Tnt Cannon Targeting Aid and set it, and then the TNT cannon will fire at that location. I can't figure out how to use it. I can't figure out how to set this into targeting mode or anything like that. I tried looking on wikis, but I couldn't find it, so I don't know how to use the targeting aid. So hopefully the Reika can enlighten us with his divine wisdom in the comments, because I don't know how to use this thing. But anyway, the TNT cannon itself is pretty simple to use. But it can be look a little intimidating. So if I go ahead and look at the GUI, you might think, what the heck is all this? But it's actually pretty darn simple, and these little pictures are actually graphical displays that are actually quite cool. So basically what this is that you can determine the angle, the upward angle at which the TNT cannon fires your TNT, and that combined with the velocity will determine how far it goes, and the compass angle determines what direction it fires from, and the fuse time, that determines how long it'll take for the TNT to explode. And then this row down here is for the actual TNT. Now, TNT cannon requires 65.536 kilowatts. That is the output of a gas engine, but it doesn't have a minimum torque requirement. So as you can see here, I'm currently giving it 1 Newton meter. So what you would do, that if you wanted to do this, is you would set up your gas engine and you would throw down some gearboxes until you get the torque to 1, which is, you know, roughly a 65-to-1 ratio. Now, you can't use this for everything, because if we look at the, actually I just right click, if we look at the handbook entry, we can see that the TNT cannon requires higher torques to fire at higher angles, steeper angles, and higher speeds to fire faster, and more power to reach farther targets. Okay? So if you throw a bunch of TNT in this, the speed will determine how quickly it fires each shot. The torque will determine what angle you can set it to, and both of those together, the power, will determine what you can set the velocity to get the distance. And what happens is that if I try and set the launch angle to something like, I don't know, 100 would be ridiculous, 45 degree angle, and I back out and go back in, it's down to 2. Because the TNT cannon will, if you try and set it for a value higher than what the power you're giving it will allow, it will automatically set itself to the maximum that you can currently get. So with 1 Newton meter of torque, I can only do a launch angle of 2. Also, if I try and set the velocity to 100 and I go back in, it's now set it down to 31. So that's the highest that I can get it to with this much power. Okay? And I can set the fuse time to whatever the heck I want. And then there's the compass angle. So by default, right now, with the way I place this, I don't know actually if the way I place this matters or if it'll always fire east by default, unless this is north. I think, but this is probably north, right? I don't really know. All I know is that if I fire this right now, the TNT cannon goes that way. So let me put some TNT in there. It makes that little explosion. TNT appears over there. and it explodes. Let me bump this back to 60 for demonstration. So it's currently being fired over there. Let me do it again. I'll show you. Actually, let's put 2 in there, and we'll see how quickly it fires to both of them. Pretty darn quick, actually. So you can really bombard a location with TNT with this thing. This is quite a bit of speed that we're giving it right now. Let's take a look then at what we would get if we gave it just like a default amount. So 128 newton meters at 512. So bump this down to 512, bump this up to 128. We're now giving it the same amount of power, but with a lot more torque. What this means is that I can set the launch angle higher. Well, it should mean I can set the launch angle higher. Unless there is a amount of torque we have to hit. So let's go ahead and bump this torque up to 256. See what we can set this to. We're still at 2. Let's bump this up to 512. Let's see what we can set the angle to. Still at 2. Tnt 24 newton meters. 4. Wow. So yeah, this thing requires a lot of torque in order to get these higher launch angles. So 10 24 newton meters torque, launch angle of 4. Let me bump the speed down, because I feel like with the TNT cannon you really won't need a ton of speed, because let's face it, we're lobbing TNT. You probably want to be more precise than anything. So how much velocity can we set? 22. So that's because we actually have less power now than we did before. See, so be careful about that. Set this back to 64. Now we've got the same amount of power that we had before. Set this to 128. Now we've got double that. So this is the output power, anyway, of an AC electric engine. And now we can set the velocity to 44. So let's try and turn the compass angle 90. Wait, I think we might want to set it. Can we set it for negative 90? Yes, we can. No, we can't. So 270. Put some TNT in there. There it goes over there. Yeah, cool. So it flew way over there. Of course, if I were to set this instead of 270, if I were to set this at 180, we would now be firing it in that direction. Ugh, stupid daytime things. So pop some TNT in there. Yeah, see? Pretty darn cool. So let's give it some more power and we'll see what that does. This is definitely a machine that you're going to want to you know, adjust the torque and speed of gearboxes to get to the power you want. It would be it would probably be very nice having a CVT unit on this thing. Let's give it hydrokinetic engines output. 16,384 newton meters at 320, 32 radians per second. 32, 16,382. Is it 16,382 or 16,384? 16,384. So I was almost right. One day I'll have these all memorized. So let's see what the launch angle we can set to with that much power, that much torque. 45, no problem. 62. So if you put a hydrokinetic engine straight onto this thing, you can get a 62 launch angle with a velocity of 88. Now, if you look at the compass angle here, the line is going to get longer or shorter. And I guess what that is showing you is how your launch angle is affecting your range. So my launch angle is pretty darn steep right now. If I set it down, the range just went up. And if I set it to like 35, it'll do it again. 25, 20, you know, different. Your launch angle will directly affect the distance that your TNT is going to get. Where'd it go? Ah, way over there. So you can see, you can get some pretty darn good distance with this TNT cannon as you start to add more torque. It was so far away, actually, that I didn't see the explosion. See? So it will fire pretty darn far if you give it some power. I mean, this would be, if there was a enemy base over there I was trying to attack, this is basically a siege weapon now. They would have a difficult time stopping us from doing this because we're pretty darn far away. So you can imagine if you're in a PvP setting, this thing, pretty darn useful. It's like a catapult firing TNT. Of course, if you want to set it to higher angles, to lob it over walls or something like that, you're not going to go as far. Where'd it go? That's what I thought anyway. No, I didn't hit that same spot. Where'd the TNT go? There's no way it went further. Where'd it go? Did it land in the water? I don't know. It disappeared. The TNT disappeared. Let's set it to a different angle and see what we get. Okay, that let's just set the compass angle back to where it was, 0. So it will have gone in this direction. Does it just take longer to land or something? I don't know what's happening to the TNT, but it must be going somewhere, but I don't know where it's going. But you can see what I'm talking about here for TNT cannon. That what we're doing is that, you know, you set your angles, you set your speed, and then you fire it based on the power that you give it. It'll go a certain distance, and you can get it to go pretty darn far. So, but you do need to be careful with the TNT cannon, because if you do it incorrectly, you can blow your TNT cannon up. So let's go back to giving it the minimum amount of power. Let's actually go back to giving it the output of a gasoline engine. 128 Newton meters of torque at 512 radians per second. 512, 128. There we go. Now what this will allow me to do is to set a launch angle of 2, and it'll allow me to set a velocity of, actually forget, 31. Which is fine. I had a situation when I was testing this thing, and I must have given it just the right combination of stupidity. Maybe if I set a really low velocity, it'll happen. Yep, TNT got lobbed right next to the cannon. So you got to be careful, because you can blow up your TNT cannon and anything next to it. So be careful with this. You are literally firing TNT through the air. It's needless to say, incredibly dangerous. So be careful. I wouldn't recommend doing it near things that you don't want to get blown up. That's why I'm doing it over here and not over there, because I don't want to blow everything up. So yeah, that's TNT cannon. Quite good, quite devastating. Of course, you do have to supply it with TNT. If you fill it with TNT or supply more TNT, it will just constantly fire TNT until you cut the power. So maybe you would want to use a clutch to cut the power after it fires how many times you want. Although I'm not sure if that will clear the settings or not. It didn't seem to clear the settings, but I imagine if you tried to edit the settings without any power in, it would clear it back to 0 because you can't have any power. So, you know, you may want to, as you are figuring out like where your TNT is going to land, you may want to jot down roughly how far it went based on the settings you set. You know, a little bit of trial and error, figure it out, go into a creative world, figure out, you know, what combinations you can give it to get it to go as far, you know, where you want it. But yeah, that's TNT cannon. I wish I could get this targeting aid to work, but I can't figure out how to do it, so I can't show you that. If Regular lets us know, I'll put an update in the description so that you'll know how to work it, because this would make it quite a bit easier. Just keep in mind, if you do figure out how to use this, it probably won't work for really, really far away blocks, because this thing does have a maximum range. I don't know what the maximum range is, but at least the handbook entries seem to hint that this TNT cannon does have a maximum range. But anyway, that's the TNT cannon. There's not much more to say. It's a cannon that fires TNT. Quite straightforward, quite useful, quite powerful. So, next episode, we will talk about the sonic weapon. Quite a nifty little thing. We'll talk about that next. I would like to ask you guys, because I was thinking about this. If I set up a Twitch channel, would you want to see me live streaming builds or Let's Plays or things like that? So, you know, that might be something I'd be interested in doing, but let me know if you'd be interested. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Stay tuned for the next one. I'm SentinalhMC, and I'm signing out.